Two BFFs, one crown, and a witch who turns people into seafood. This African folktale has more betrayal than your average episode of Real Housewives and twice the body count. In a vibrant village nestled along a winding riverbank, where the water whispered ancient stories and palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, lived two young women whose friendship was legendary. Lami and Ada had been inseparable since they could barely walk, their laughter echoing through the dusty streets and their footsteps always in perfect sync. From dawn to dusk, wherever you found one, the other was sure to be nearby. When Lami went to fetch water from the stream, Ada would be right beside her, their clay pots balanced carefully on their heads as they shared secrets and dreams. During village festivals, they would dance together, their colorful wraps swirling in the firelight, their movements so perfectly matched that the elders would smile and nod, saying they must have been sisters in a past life. Lami was known for her quick wit and clever solutions. Whenever someone in the village faced a problem, she would furrow her brow in thought before coming up with an ingenious answer that left everyone amazed. Her mind worked like the river itself, always flowing, always finding a new path forward. Ada, on the other hand, carried a different kind of magic. Her beauty was remarkable, but it was her gentle heart that truly set her apart. She had a way of bringing smiles to the faces of even the grumpiest village elders, and children would flock to her like birds to morning light. When she spoke, her voice carried the warmth of the afternoon sun, and her kindness seemed as natural as breathing. In the cool evenings, they would sit beneath the ancient baobab tree, whispering their hopes and fears under a canopy of stars. They shared everything, their joys, their sorrows, their dreams of the future. Lami would talk about her plans to become the most respected woman in the village, while Ada would speak of finding true love and raising a family filled with laughter. The villagers often remarked that their friendship was blessed by the gods themselves. "Look how they care for each other," the old women would say as they watched the two friends walk past. "That is the kind of friendship that lasts lifetimes." But even the strongest friendships can be tested, and no one could have predicted how their bond would be challenged when love and power entered their lives. For now, though they remained blissfully unaware of the storms gathering on their horizon, they were simply Lami and Ada, two hearts beating as one, their friendship as steady as the river that flowed past their village, their future seemingly as bright as the African sun that watched over them day after day. In these peaceful days, their laughter still rang pure and true, their dreams still intertwined like vines reaching for the sky, and their friendship still seemed as unbreakable as the ancient rocks that lined the riverbank. But change was coming, as surely as the seasons turn, and their story was about to take an unexpected turn. The air thrummed with excitement during the harvest festival, drums beating like wild hearts as dancers whirled in clouds of red dust. Among them, Ada moved with natural grace, her smile radiant as moonlight on water. It was at this moment that King Obi first saw her, and in that instant everything changed. King Obi stood tall among his people, his presence commanding yet warm. His eyes, usually focused on matters of state, couldn't leave Ada's dancing form. He watched as she moved through the traditional steps, her movements fluid as a stream, her joy infectious to all around her. The king, who had seen countless celebrations and beautiful women, found himself enchanted. The courtship was swift and decisive, as befitting a king. Within days, royal messengers arrived at Ada's family compound, bearing gifts and the king's intention. The village buzzed with excitement. One of their own would become queen. Ada's parents, overwhelmed with joy, accepted the king's proposal with tears of happiness. Lami stood beside Ada through it all, helping with wedding preparations, arranging her friend's clothes, braiding her hair for the ceremony. But beneath her smiles, a darkness was growing. Each time Ada spoke of King Obi's kindness, each time she showed off another royal gift, Lami felt the thorns of jealousy dig deeper into her heart. Why her, Lami would whisper to herself in the dark of night. "We were always equals, now she will be queen, and I will remain nothing." The thought ate at her like acid, turning her once pure friendship into something bitter and twisted. As Ada moved into the palace, Lami watched her friend transform from village girl to royal wife. The simple wraps they once shared were replaced by elaborate royal robes. The quiet evenings they spent sharing stories became formal palace gatherings where Lami felt increasingly out of place. One night, when the moon hung low and yellow like a watching eye, Lamy made her decision. Stories told of an old witch who lived deep in the forest, a woman who could grant any wish for a price. Wrapping herself in dark cloth, Lamy slipped away from the village, following the whispered directions of those who claimed to know the way. The forest grew darker and stranger as she walked, branches reaching like gnarled fingers, leaves whispering secrets she couldn't quite hear. Fear clawed at her throat, but jealousy drove her deeper into the shadows. Finally, she found it a small hut that seemed to grow from the forest floor itself, smoke curling from its chimney like beckoning fingers. Inside sat an ancient woman, her eyes holding centuries of darkness. "I know why you've come," the witch said before Lamy could speak. "You want to destroy what you once loved most." Her crooked smile revealed blackened teeth. "Are you ready to pay the price?" Lamy's heart pounded, but her voice was steady as steel when she answered, "Yes, whatever it takes." The witch's crooked fingers curled around a small glass bottle filled with liquid green as pond scum. In the dim light of her hut, it seemed to pulse with its own eerie glow. "One drop," she rasped, her smile revealing teeth dark as cemetery stones, "and your friend will become something small, something helpless. A golden fish swimming far from her crown and throne." Lamy clutched the bottle to her chest, her heart beating in rhythm with the strange light within. As she hurried home through the darkened forest, branches seemed to reach for her like accusing fingers, but she pressed on, her mind focused only on her plan. The potion felt warm against her skin, as if it knew the darkness of its purpose. Days passed as Lamy waited for the perfect moment. It came on a quiet afternoon when Ada, still wearing her royal robes, visited her old friend's humble hut. "I've missed you so much," Lamy, Ada said, her smile as warm and genuine as ever. "The palace feels empty without my dearest friend." Lamy's hands trembled as she prepared the drinks, her back turned to hide her expression. "I've made something special," she said, carefully measuring the green liquid into one cup. "An old family recipe for strength and happiness." She forced her voice to remain steady, though guilt and excitement made her throat tight. Ada accepted the cup with trusting eyes, the same eyes that had shared countless secrets and dreams. "You're too good to me, Lamy," she said, raising the cup to her lips. Lamy watched, her heart thundering in her chest as Ada drank deeply. The transformation was instant and terrible to behold. Ada's eyes widened in confusion, then fear. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as her body began to shrink and change. Her beautiful royal robes crumpled empty to the floor as her arms disappeared. Her legs merged into a tail, and scales sprouted across her skin, gleaming like beaten gold. Within moments, where the queen had stood, there was only a small golden fish flopping desperately on the dirt floor. Its eyes, Ada's eyes, looked up at Lamy with terrible recognition and betrayal. Lamy forced herself to look away, scooping up the fish in trembling hands. She ran to the river, her feet carrying her swiftly along the familiar path. The water rushed dark and deep, its surface reflecting the gathering storm clouds above. Standing at the riverbank, Lamy held the fish that had been her friend, watching it gasp and struggle in her palms. "Goodbye, Ada," she whispered, and with a swift motion, she threw the golden fish into the rushing water. It disappeared beneath the surface with barely a splash, swept away by the current. Lamy stood watching the river long after any trace of gold had vanished, feeling something within her change as surely as Ada had transformed. Thunder rolled overhead as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, as if the sky itself wept for what had been lost that day, not just a queen, but a friendship as deep as the river that now carried Ada away. The palace halls echoed with emptiness after Ada's disappearance. King Obi wandered like a ghost through the royal chambers, his eyes hollow with grief, his voice hoarse from calling her name. Every morning he sent search parties into the villages and forests, promising greater rewards with each passing day. Every evening they returned empty-handed, and the king's despair deepened like shadows at sunset. In his fitful sleep, dreams haunted him, visions of Ada standing by the riverbank, her voice carried on the wind, calling to him for help. He would wake with tears on his face, reaching for someone who was no longer there. The palace staff whispered among themselves, worried for their beloved king, who seemed to be fading like morning mist. Lamy watched it all with calculating eyes, visiting the palace frequently under the guise of sharing the king's grief. "My king," she would say softly, placing a gentle hand on his arm, "you must eat something. Ada would want you to stay strong." But despite her constant presence, her sweet words and caring gestures, King Obi's heart remained close to her, locked in mourning for his lost queen. Frustration grew within Lami like poison ivy, choking out what little conscience remained. Once again, she found herself on the dark path to the witch's hut, determination driving her deeper into the forest than before. The old woman was waiting, as if she had known Lami would return. "Love is what you seek now," the witch cackled, her voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "But powerful magic requires powerful sacrifice. Are you prepared to pay the price?" "Name it," Lami demanded, her voice hard with desperation. The witch's eyes glittered like beetle shells in the dim light. "Your womb," she said simply. "You will never bear children. The ability to create life must be traded for the power to bend it to your will." Lami's hand instinctively went to her belly, ancient dreams of motherhood flickering through her mind. But the crown beckoned stronger than any child's cry. "Done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The witch mixed her potion in a black pot, dropping in herbs that screamed when they hit the liquid. The final mixture glowed red as heart's blood. "One drop in his food," the witch instructed, "and his heart will be yours forever." That evening, Lami volunteered to bring the king his dinner herself. With trembling hands, she added the potion to his stew, watching it disappear into the broth like sunset into night. When King Obi ate, his eyes changed instantly, the grief vanishing like morning dew, replaced by an artificial warmth that focused solely on Lami. The spell had worked. But as the king smiled at her with enchanted eyes, Lami felt the price of her victory, a hollow ache in her womb, where future dreams had died. She had won her crown, but the victory tasted bitter as ash in her mouth. In the early morning light, Nea trudged to the river with her clay pot balanced on her head, her heart heavy with familiar worries. Since her husband's death, each day had been a struggle to feed herself and her daughter Cassie. As she dipped her pot into the clear water, she whispered her daily prayer, "God, please send us just one blessing to change our lives." When she returned home and emptied her pot into the basin, something extraordinary tumbled out with the water, a fish unlike any she had ever seen. Its scales shimmered like pure gold in the morning sun, its movements graceful and almost deliberate. Nea's heart leapt into her throat. She recognized it immediately as the legendary golden fish, said to appear only once every decade. "Cassie," she called, her voice trembling with excitement. "Come quickly." Her daughter rushed in, dropping the firewood she'd been carrying. Together they stared at the magnificent creature swimming in their humble basin. "Mama," Cassie whispered, "we could sell it. The merchants would pay a fortune for such a rare fish. We'd never be hungry again." Nea nodded, already imagining a life free from poverty's cruel grip. They carefully transferred the fish to a larger bowl, planning to take it to market the next day. That night, while Nea slept, Cassie sat beside the bowl, unable to rest. Something about the fish seemed different. Its eyes held an intelligence that unsettled her. As she watched, the fish swam in careful patterns, almost as if trying to communicate. "You're not an ordinary fish, are you?" Cassie whispered, feeling slightly foolish for talking to it. To her astonishment, the water rippled unnaturally, and a soft voice replied, "Help me." Cassie nearly knocked over the bowl in shock. The voice came again, clearer this time. "I am Ada, queen of this land. A friend's jealousy and dark magic trapped me in this form. Please don't sell me, help me return to my true self." With trembling hands, Cassie woke her mother. Nea listened in wonder as the fish's Ada told her story. The poor widow's heart twisted with compassion, remembering the beloved queen's disappearance that had plunged the kingdom into sorrow. "But Mama," Cassie said softly, "what about the money? This could be our only chance to escape poverty." Nea looked at the golden fish, thinking of all the stories she'd heard about Queen Ada's kindness. Her daughter was right, selling the fish could end their struggles forever. But as she imagined the queen trapped in this form, separated from her love and her life, she knew what they had to do. "Some things are worth more than gold," Nea said firmly. "We'll help you, Queen Ada, whatever it takes." In that moment, their lives changed course, not through the wealth they dreamed of, but through a choice to help another in need, never knowing the adventures and dangers that lay ahead. Word spread quickly through the village about Nea's miraculous catch. That evening, 3 merchants huddled in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with greed. Tonight, one whispered, "We'll take the fish by force. That old widow doesn't deserve such treasure." But one merchant, remembering Naa's past kindness, slipped away to warn her. He arrived breathless at her door. "They're coming for the fish," he gasped. "You must leave now. The forest is your only hope." Naa's heart raced as she grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with bread and a blanket. Cassie carefully lifted the bowl containing Ada, and together they slipped into the gathering darkness. The forest loomed before them, ancient trees stretching their branches like grasping fingers against the starlit sky. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures, the whisper of leaves in the wind. Cassie clutched the bowl closer, feeling the weight of their responsibility with every step. After hours of stumbling through the darkness, they discovered an abandoned hut, its roof thick with moss, its walls weathered by countless seasons. "We'll rest here," Naa whispered, though the strange shadows made her nervous. They settled inside, exhausted but alert, the golden fish swimming quiet circles in its bowl. As midnight approached, the air grew suddenly cold. A bright light filled the doorway, and an old woman appeared, her hair white as moonlight, her eyes sparkling with ancient wisdom. "Do not be afraid," she said, her voice gentle yet powerful. "The gods have sent me to help you." Naa and Cassie listened intently as the old woman revealed the path to breaking the spell. "Take this rare herb," she said, producing a bundle of leaves that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. "Rub it on the fish and the transformation will begin. But remember, this is only half the cure." The old woman's eyes grew serious. "You must ensure King Obi sees Ada within 7 days of using the herb. If he doesn't, she will remain a fish forever, and the spell can never be broken." She pointed through the trees. "Follow this path back to the village, but be cautious. Dark forces will try to stop you." 7 days, Cassie whispered, clutching the herb. "How will we ever get close enough to the king?" The old woman smiled mysteriously. "Trust in your hearts. The gods did not bring you this far to fail now." With that, she vanished as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving only the glowing herb as proof she had ever been there. Naa and Cassie looked at each other, then at the fish that was really their queen. The journey ahead seemed impossible, returning to a village where merchants hunted them, somehow reaching a king bewitched by dark magic, all within 7 days. But as the first light of dawn crept through the trees, they knew they had to try. "We'll find a way," Naa said firmly, gathering their few belongings. "For Ada, for the king, for the kingdom itself, we'll find a way." The palace that once echoed with warmth and laughter under Ada's reign now rang with sharp commands and cruel decrees. Lami, drunk with power, revealed her true nature like a snake shedding its skin. Her first act of cruelty targeted those who reminded her most of her betrayal, Ada's parents. One morning, she summoned Ada's mother to the palace kitchen. "The royal cooks don't please me," Lami announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You will prepare my meals instead." She watched with cold satisfaction as the older woman, once like a second mother to her, spent hours laboring over hot fires. When the food was ready, Lami would barely taste it before declaring it inadequate, demanding it be made again. For Ada's father, she reserved different torments. She ordered him to work in the royal gardens under the scorching sun, trimming hedges and pulling weeds until his hands bled and his back ached. The palace gardeners tried to help him, but Lami's watchful eyes ensured he worked alone. Her tyranny spread beyond Ada's family. She imposed harsh taxes on the villagers, punished the smallest perceived slights with banishment, and turned neighbor against neighbor through her network of spies. The once vibrant marketplace fell quiet as people hurried about their business, afraid to linger and talk. The village chiefs, respected elders who had guided the community for generations, could no longer remain silent. They gathered in secret, their faces grave in the lamplight. "She has gone too far," the eldest chief declared. "We must speak with her, remind her of our ways." The next morning they approached the palace, their dignity wrapped around them like royal robes. Lami received them on her throne, her smile sharp as a blade. When they spoke of justice and tradition, her face darkened like storm clouds gathering. "How dare you question me?" she thundered, rising from her throne. "I am your queen." The first could have you all banished for this insolence the chiefs left in defeat, their attempts at reason shattered against the wall of her madness. In the marketplace, in the fields, in the quiet corners of homes, discontent grew like weeds after rain. Remember how it was under Queen Ada people would whisper, "She treated us like family. This one treats us like slaves." But fear kept their voices low and their heads bowed. The palace servants watched Lami's cruelty with growing horror. They remembered how she and Ada had once been inseparable friends, and they wondered what darkness had twisted her heart so completely. Some claimed they heard her laughing madly in her chambers late at night, while others swore they saw her talking to shadows. King Obi, still under her spell, remained blind to it all. When villagers tried to speak to him of their suffering, his enchanted eyes would glaze over, and he would defer to Lami's judgment. The kingdom that had once flourished under Ada's gentle touch now withered beneath Lami's iron fist, as if the land itself recoiled from her touch. Na-A and Cassie approached the palace gates with pounding hearts, the precious bowl containing Ada hidden beneath a cloth. The guards eyed them suspiciously, but allowed them to enter when they insisted on an urgent message for the king. Instead of reaching King Obi, however, they found themselves face to face with Queen Lami, her eyes cold as winter stones. "Why do you dare disturb the palace?" Lami demanded, her voice sharp as a whip. Na-A tried to explain, but Lami cut her off, ordering the guards to remove them. As they were dragged away, Kasi caught sight of an older couple watching from the shadows Ada's parents, their faces lined with grief and fear. Later that evening, they found Ada's parents' home, marked by a giant mango tree. When Na-A revealed the golden fish, Ada's mother collapsed in tears, reaching out to touch the bowl with trembling hands. "My daughter," she whispered, "my beautiful daughter." As they shared their story, Ada's father leaned forward, hope lighting his tired eyes. "There might be a way," he said quietly. "The palm wine tapper, he's the only one Lami trusts, the only one allowed to move freely in the palace. If anyone can help us reach the king, it's him." They found the palm wine tapper at his compound, surrounded by tall palm trees. He listened to their tale in silence, his weathered face revealing nothing. But when they finished, he nodded slowly. "I have watched Lami's cruelty grow," he said. "I've suspected dark magic at work. Yes, I will help you." Together they crafted their plan. The palm wine tapper would smuggle the fish into the palace, hidden among his daily deliveries. He knew the king's habits. Every evening, Obi would walk alone in the palace garden, seeking solace from his enchanted grief. "I will wait in the shadows," the palm wine tapper explained, "and when the moment is right, I will show him the fish. If what you say is true, if this spell can be broken, that will be our chance." But Ada's mother wrung her hands anxiously. "Lami watches everything," she warned. "Her spies are everywhere. If she suspects anything, then we must be perfect," Na-A said firmly. "We have no choice. The herb will only work for 7 days, and we've already used one. This is our only hope." As darkness fell, they made their final preparations. The palm wine tapper carefully wrapped the bowl containing Ada in layers of cloth, hiding it among his wine gourds. Na-A and Kasi would wait with Ada's parents, praying to the gods for success. "Remember," the palm wine tapper said as he prepared to leave, "if this fails, we all face Lami's wrath. But if it succeeds," he didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what was at stake, not just Ada's life, but the future of the entire kingdom. The palace gardens lay quiet in the evening light, broken only by King Obi's solitary footsteps along the twisted paths. His eyes, clouded by Lami's spell, held the vacant look they had worn for months. Hidden behind a flowering bush, the palm wine tapper clutched the bowl containing the golden fish, his heart thundering in his chest as he waited for the perfect moment. As the king passed near his hiding place, the tapper stepped out, his voice steady despite his fear. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "I have something you must see." Before the king could react, the tapper unwrapped the cloth, revealing the golden fish swimming in gentle circles. The moment the king's eyes fell upon the fish, something stirred in his enchanted mind. The fish's scales caught the dying sunlight, sending flashes of gold across his face. Its eyes, those familiar, loving eyes, met his, and suddenly the fog in his mind began to lift like morning mist before the sun. The tapper quickly pulled out the glowing herb the old woman had given them. rubbing it gently across the fish's scales. The water in the bowl began to shimmer and swirl, glowing with an otherworldly light. The fish rose to the surface, its form beginning to change. In a flash of brilliant light that lit up the entire garden, the transformation began. The water rose in a spinning column, and within it, the fish's form grew and shifted. Scales melted into skin, fins elongated into arms and legs, and where moments before there had been a golden fish, now stood Ada, as beautiful as the day she disappeared. The sight of his true love broke Lami's spell completely. The artificial warmth in King Obi's eyes shattered like glass, replaced by real emotion, recognition, joy, and deep love. Ada, he whispered, his voice breaking as he reached for her. My Ada. They came together in a desperate embrace, tears flowing freely down both their faces. The palm wine tapper slipped away quietly, running to fetch Ada's parents who had been waiting anxiously nearby. When they arrived at the garden, they found their daughter and the king still holding each other, unwilling to let go. Mother. Father Ada cried out when she saw them, her arms opening wide to include them in the embrace. Her mother sobbed openly, touching her daughter's face as if to make sure she was real. Her father, usually so dignified, wept without shame as he held his child. The noise drew others to the garden servants, guards, and palace workers who had known and loved their gentle queen. Word spread like wildfire through the palace. Queen Ada has returned. The true queen is back. As the sun set over the palace gardens, painting the sky in shades of gold that matched the scales Ada had worn for so long, the family clung to each other, their joy illuminating the gathering darkness. The nightmare was over. Love had broken the spell of hatred, and good had triumphed over evil once again. In that moment of pure joy, none of them thought about Lami or what would happen next. There would be time for justice later. For now, there was only love, reunion, and the miracle of a family made whole again. Deep in the forest, Lami burst into the witch's hut, her elegant robes torn from branches, her crown askew. Give me something stronger, she demanded, panic making her voice shrill. A charm to destroy them all. The old witch's eyes glittered like dark stones in firelight as she watched the fallen queen's desperation. There is one last charm, the witch rasped, reaching for her darkest potions. But the price is steep and the rules absolute. She mixed ingredients in a black pouch, each one hissing as it joined the others. Take this path back to the palace. Whatever you hear, whatever calls to you, do not look back. Break this rule and the charm will turn against you. Lami snatched the pouch, clutching it like a lifeline. As she hurried through the darkening forest, a voice began to whisper behind her. Lami, it called, sweet as honey. Beautiful Lami, strongest of queens. The words stroked her ego like a gentle hand, but she remembered the witch's warning and pressed forward. The voice grew louder, more enticing. Look at you, Lami. So powerful, so magnificent. Don't you want to see how magnificent you are? Lami's steps faltered. Her pride, always her weakness, pulled at her like a physical force. Just one quick glance, she thought. What harm could it do? She turned her head. The moment her eyes looked back, the charm exploded in her mind like shattered glass. Laughter bubbled up from her throat, wild and uncontrolled. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, rational thoughts replaced by chaos. The pouch fell from her nerveless fingers as she spun in circles, cackling at the sky. Through the village she ran, her once proud bearing gone, replaced by jerky movements and random outbursts of song and screams. Her hair flew wild, her eyes rolled madly, and her fine clothes hung in tatters. Villagers drew back in horror as she passed, crossing themselves and whispering prayers. She burst into the palace courtyard, her laughter echoing off the stone walls. Guards who had once jumped to obey her commands now stared in shocked silence at their former queen, reduced to a raving madwoman. Even in her madness, something drove her toward the throne room, toward her final confrontation with Ada and the king. But fate had other plans. As she ran across the village square, a merchant's cart rounded the corner at full speed. The driver saw her too late. The horses reared, the cart swerved, and in an instant, Lami's laughter was cut terribly short. In the end, the mighty queen who had schemed and sacrificed everything for power died alone in the dust of the village square. Some said it was justice, others called it mercy, but all agreed that her death marked the end of a dark chapter in their kingdom's history. The old witch, watching from her forest hut through a bowl of dark water, nodded slowly. Pride and power, she muttered to herself. They always look back. They always look back. In the days that followed Lami's death, the kingdom bloomed like a flower after rain. King Obi, free from the dark spell at last, called Nay and Kasi to the palace. They entered the throne room nervously, but Ada rushed to embrace them, her eyes bright with tears of gratitude. "You saved not just my life, but our entire kingdom," she said, holding their hands tightly. "How can we ever repay such courage and kindness?" King Obi stepped forward, his voice warm and strong. "From this day forward, you will have a place of honor in our kingdom. A new home awaits you near the palace, a grand house with fertile land for farming. You'll never know want or hardship again." Naa's eyes filled with tears as she remembered her desperate prayers by the river. She had asked for one blessing to change their lives, never imagining it would come through helping others rather than finding gold. Kasi beamed beside her, hardly able to believe their humble hut would be replaced by a real home. The palace itself transformed under Ada's renewed presence. The fear that had gripped the servants melted away, replaced by joy and laughter. The village markets came alive again, filled with music and dancing. People spoke freely, their faces bright with hope, no longer afraid of spies and whispered accusations. Then, just as the kingdom had found its rhythm again, wonderful news spread through the land. Queen Ada was expecting a child. The palace buzzed with excitement, and when the time came, the joy doubled. Ada gave birth to twin boys, their cries strong and healthy in the morning air. The kingdom celebrated for 7 days and nights. Every home lit special candles for the princes, and the palace gate stayed open as people came to offer gifts and blessings. The twins grew strong and kind, watched over not just by their royal parents, but by the entire kingdom that had fought so hard for their family's happiness. Naa and Kasi became regular visitors to the palace, honored guests at every celebration. Their farm prospered, providing work for many villagers who had struggled under Lami's harsh rule. Kasi, who had first heard Ada's voice when she was just a fish, became like a sister to the young princes, telling them stories of courage and kindness. The years passed and the kingdom flourished. The river where Ada had spent so many days as a golden fish became a place of blessing. People said that sometimes on quiet evenings, you could see fish with scales that gleamed like gold, though none were ever caught. Perhaps they were there to remind everyone that magic existed in the world, both dark and light, but love and courage would always prove stronger than any spell. In the end, what began with two best friends by a riverbank had transformed into something larger, a tale of betrayal and redemption, of courage and kindness, of justice and joy. And in the hearts of all who lived there, the truth became clear. Sometimes the greatest magic of all lies not in spells or potions, but in the simple choice to help others, even when it cost us everything we thought we wanted.